We are now going live. Iman, you want to turn on your camera so they can see you? We're now going live, and the email if anyone is interested. And so thanks for being here today. We have not a very good connection with the Wi-Fi today. I apologize for that. I would like to introduce jury members and the candidate. So Guido Cimadomo, who is not here right now, perhaps he's going to join later. He is the co-advisor of this master thesis. He is an associate professor in the Department of Art and Architecture at Universidad de Malaga in Spain, where he has been teaching since 2010 with a degree from Polytechnic of Milano and a PhD from Universidad de Sevilla in Spain. He is an expert member of the ICOMOS CIPA Scientific Committee for Architectural Heritage, member of the UNI Focal Point Habitat at the University of Malaga, and chair of the Institute for the Study of the International Expositions. He was an ATCH Fellow at the University of Queensland, Australia, and a research associate at the University of Oregon in the United States. In 2022, his research interests deal with urban transformation, heritage documentation and catalogation, the dissemination of architecture, and historiography in the digital era. So he is the co-advisor of this research. And then the jury members, Mehmet Saner is an assistant professor at Uzagi University. He holds a bachelor from Middle East Technical University, a master from the same university, and a PhD from that same university, METU, Department of Architecture. Visited TU Dortmund, Technische Universität in Dortmund, and carried out his researches for 2 years on a research grant from DAAD during his doctoral studies. Along with his expertise on urban voids, he is interested in conservation and reuse of old industrial buildings and areas in urban and regional scales. Özlem Ozer, other jury member, is a urban planner specialized in spatial analysis and design of street networks in urban areas. Holds a PhD in urban and regional planning. Before becoming an academician, she worked as an urban planner, both in national and international projects for more than 10 years. She has been now working in academia as a lecturer and a researcher. Was Vice Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Design and Architecture, and coordinator of the graduate program in Istanbul Okan University. She is currently as an associate professor in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at Gebze Technical University, and her research is focused on urban design, walkability, space syntax, spatial morphologies, and GIS technologies. Iman Saidi is from Morocco. She is currently a master's student at Uzagi University. She holds a bachelor degree from Antalya International University, Department of Architecture. Has been working as a freelance designer in Morocco and Turkey. She is interested in the field of sustainable design, architecture of historical cities, and her thesis is about diachronic urban morphology, the formation process of Ait Ben Haddou, Morocco. And if I can find myself, I can introduce myself. There you go. That's me. I graduated in Sapienza, and I defended my PhD thesis on history of medieval town planning in Ravenna and St. University, where I also attended postdoctoral studies until 2014. I have been teaching at the Rome program of the School of Architecture of the University of Miami and the Faculty of Architecture, Design and Fine Arts of Girne American University in Cyprus. I am the editor, co-editor with Martin and others of Forma Civitatis International Journal of Urban and Territorial Morphological Studies, published by Grunberg Verlag in Weimar and Rostock, and council member of the Society for Post-Medieval Archaeology in the UK. I am currently associate professor and director of the Laboratory of Dynamic Research on Urban Morphology, DRUM, at the Faculty of Architecture and Design of Boğaziçi University in Istanbul. My main research interests are architectural and urban design, heritage management, and design in archaeological areas. Of course, it doesn't mention here, but urban morphology is one of my research topics. I will be moving to University of Pescara at the end of January because I got a chair in architectural composition. So this is my last semester at Boğaziçi. I think I did introduce everyone, right? Now, the stage can go to Iman. We would like to keep it within 45 minutes, if possible. In the meantime, Guido Cimadomo from Malaga joined. Hello, Guido. We have already introduced you and everyone else to the jury and the audience. Welcome, benvenido. And so now, after the presentations, I can give the stage to Iman. So if possible, keep it within the maximum 45 minutes. After that, we will ask the jury members if they want to provide feedback. On Zoom, we see something different. So you want to go and change your display settings to make it duplicate screen. But what is visible on Zoom is the presenter. No, not there, on PowerPoint. On PowerPoint, there's an option to, for your display when you're presenting full screen, local screen. So see, you should share the screen on Zoom. Share the screen. Share the screen, not share presentation. So see what it looks like here. Go full screen. Screen. See, it's presentation. So go to display settings here and put it duplicate. Duplicate. So, ready? Go.
Okay, should I see it? Okay. Welcome everybody, and I would like to start by providing results of my research study tackling the formation process of Haddou. I would like to first start by thanking my advisor, Professor Kamis, and my co-advisor, Professor Guido Cimadomo from the University of Malaga, for their constant help and guidance throughout this journey. I begin with a quote by Brodel that speaks, "Entre les temps différents de l'histoire, la longue durée se présente." I have to move this to the side. Okay. Entre les temps différents de l'histoire, la longue durée se présente ainsi comme un personnage encombrant, compliqué, souvent inédit. Between different times of history, the long durée presents itself as an overwhelming, complicated, often unprecedented character. The main research of this study is to answer the question of how the Qasr Haddou was formed and when was it formed. According to UNESCO, the earliest construction in the site dates to the 17th century. However, local memory entails an ancient history of the settlement. In this regard, we aim to tackle the historical inquiry and place Haddou in its geographical context, along with an urban analysis through the application of the Canadian theoretical framework along an investigation of geographical and cultural area. These are some terms we'll be using through the presentation, and they're very essential in understanding the terminology we'll be using. Qsar, or Qasr in Arabic, and Ighram in Berber, identifies fortified villages in North Africa. Qsur, which is the plural of Qsar, fortified villages in North Africa. Berber, al-Barbar in Arabic, Latin term to refer to the ethnic people of Morocco called Imazighan. And lastly, Tighram, which is al-Qasaba in Arabic, identifying the fortified castle in Berber language. So we'll start by introducing the location of the settlement. So Ait bin Haddou is located in the semi-desert region of South Morocco, in the region called Daraa region, by the Onila Valley, north of the Daraa region. So we see that the Daraa region is limited by the Atlas Mountain series, creating a natural geographical borders of the tribal community. The Qsar was inscribed in the UNESCO list of World Heritage Sites in 1987, which has led to the beginning of construction of restoration and conservation work. The settlement also stands in a cultural area that is identified by the Tashhit cultural area, which is part of the large Berber community in Morocco. Initially, we start by giving a history of the region in order to place the settlement in its historical context. So the region of Daraa in the Atlas is known by some of the most ancient engravings and inscriptions scattered across its territories. This is an example of one of the studies engraving called Azibnikis found in Daraa, which presents some of the ancient inscriptions in Berber script. One of the earliest references who spoke about the people of Daraa was Strabo in the 1st century BC, and he speaks that the Atlas Mountains, which extend throughout the middle of Mauritania, is inhabited by the largest of Libyan tribes, who are called Gaetulians. In this regard, Pliny the Elder gives a precise identification of the Gaetulians and calls them Darian Gaetulians, indicating the Gaetulian tribes of Daraa located by a river, lively with animals full of crocodiles and hippos. Significantly, the coin of the Roman king, Mauritanian king Juba II, presents the symbology of the animals identified by Pliny the Elder. He also gives another term called Gaetulico Morice, which identifies a purple dye that the Romans used to obtain in the Atlas region. And this also signifies the trade that happened and took place between the Romans and the people of the Gaetulia, but also identifies the climate that reigned in the region. The purple dye is taken from the seashells. They're called Murex seashells, which were found in the Atlas region, and now the region is a semi-desert region. So we have sources that speak about the change of climate throughout the history. The Islamic period has provided some of the earliest geographers who speak in particularly about the settlements. Ibn Khudadaba, who is the Persian geographer, speaks about the region in the 9th century. And he states that Daraa is a large city inhabited by a large number of people and home to silver metal. And Idrisi in the 12th century, it mentions that Daraa is not a compact city. Rather, it is a number of small villages of close proximity to one another, known for farming and agricultural lands. In the 15th century, we get a more precise identification of the position of these settlements in the territory given by Al-Wazan, who speaks of large number of fortified castles stand in distance from one another from 3 to 4 miles from Qsar to another, made with stone and clay. The map by Abraham Ortelius gives a similar description of Al-Wazan in 15th century and reflects the current state of the region as well. In this regard, the historical trade route along this territory was a very significant one. Al-Wazan mentions that the Berbers traded animals with Timbuktu, transported horses in exchange of gold coins, and exchanged books and manuscripts in time when Timbuktu was a flourishing city of knowledge, literature, and scholars. The other does not show this exact description by Al-Wazan, where we see the king of Sudan, Mansa Musa, in exchange of gold coins with the Berber communities. The history of the gold trade is an ancient one. According to Tarikh al-Fattash Chronicles, it began with the Ghana Empire, which has began in the 3rd century. The salt trade is another significant trade that took place throughout the northwestern African territories. According to Ibn Battuta, the origin of the salt trade is unknown. However, the Berber caravan routes that connected the Berber region with the salt cities was very ancient. In this regard, the Jewish presence is also significant within this trade network. Al-Bakri states that the Jews living in Sijil Masa, which is a neighboring city to Daraa, were specialists in masonry and architecture. Throughout the historical inquiry, we've not only placed Aytun Haddou in its historical context, but also understood the richness of resources and the climate that once reigned the region. And this will establish the coming chapter which will talk about the history of Aytun Haddou in particular. So moving to a smaller scale. Now we look at when we start the inquiry of the toponomastic analysis, we start with understanding the name Aytun Haddou. So the name Aytun Haddou is a translation to the Berber name of the descendant of the son of Haddou, which is a sign of an ordered and a ruling system that reigned in the settlement. One of the earliest depictions of the settlement through written sources was given by a French geographer who crossed the Onila Valley in 1903, where he gave a different name from the current name of the settlement. The picture here depicts the earliest picture of the settlement, where the author speaks of another source, another French priest who was exploring the region, who is Charles de Foucault. In his book, Reconnaissance au Maroc, Charles de Foucault talks about the settlements along the Onila Valley, where he goes from North Onila towards the South Onila and describes each village one by one in order. So what we did is we placed these villages by according to Foucault's trail, and the results show that the villages recorded by Foucault match the villages existing in the village, and significantly all the settlements remain with the same names. However, Aytun Haddou seemed to be replaced with Ait Isa. Another source given in the early 18th century, which was an inheritance document of a house in Aytun Haddou, speaks of the place of issue to be Ait Isa. In this prospect, oral history is very significant in understanding the way the locals transmit knowledge, which is also an important part in understanding the historical context. In the Berber tribes of Morocco, oral tradition represents a dominant part of culture. Using rich poetic language, Berbers elicit emotional response through traditional spoken performances as a tool to revive historical events. In an interview conducted with Mr. Malik, who is a local resident and a self-taught historian in the region, he speaks of a very known, story that resides in the memory of the locals, of a king called Ouad. This king who had 5 daughters. The name of the daughters were Asata, Dulata, Sergata, Zelfata, Tilwata. Significantly, these names resemble villages nearby the territories of Aytun Haddou. Asata being Ait Isa, according to the written sources, and the placement of these territories, the placement of these cities, of these towns, show their connectedness along a valley route system. In these maps, we have identified their location one by one. And this is where we see the importance of talking about the oral tradition in understanding the process, the formation, in understanding the historical context of the Berber historical towns. Now, we talk about the territorial organism as an important part to understand, to place the settlement within its territory. The ridge top route theory traces the prehistoric movements, human migration movements, and the settlement location along a system of ridge routes and valley routes. Significantly, when we look at the placement of the settlement nearby the territory of Aytun Haddou, towards the north, we have what is the beginning of the Atlas Mountain series. So a number of low promontory settlements stand along the mountainous region, and towards the south, the more the land gets more flat, the valley becomes an essential part of the positioning of every settlement. In this regard, Aytun Haddou, a closer look to Aytun Haddou identifies it as an oasis city where it contains a multi-religious environment. We have a Muslim cemetery and a Jewish cemetery. that are also shown. The religious, multi-religious identification is shown through the urban tissue, as we have the Jewish neighborhood towards the southeast, a synagogue at the center of the city, and a mosque towards the valley. And if we look at the urban tissue just by giving it a glance, we can see the urban pattern moving from the Jewish district from an irregular pattern towards a regular pattern. And this has leading to the type of morphological study, which begins by understanding the location of the settlement within its territory. So when we look at Haddou within its geographical territory, we see that it sits on a hilltop, and on the hilltop we have fortification walls that surround the remains of a Berber bank. So the Berber banks now does not exist anymore in the region. However, one building that stands as traces of the Berber bank presents the original location of the town. The hill presents a natural geographical defensive ground, and the local memory states that the foundation of the Ksar began at the hilltop. Through the development of the urban tissue, following the progressive growth of small town by Kanichi and Maffei in 1979, we can understand how the urban tissue forms from a source point towards an attractor point. So when we look at one of the initial expansions that happened from the hilltop towards an attractor point, which in this case is the gate of the settlement. We know that the gate, we know that this is one of the initial phases, is supported by the understanding of the names used in the Berber tradition. So the main gate is used to, the name of the main gate is Imi Niglam in Berber, which translates to the mouth of the village. Other gates have different names to identify different functions taking place in the area. When we take a closer look at the formation of this Jewish neighborhood, we see that the houses align and face the inner street, making it a compact city that was developed throughout this route being the initial route. Now, the third phase happens throughout an expansion of street network from the Jewish neighborhood, where the expansion takes a route towards the west, towards the Valley route, and ends by the mosque. And significantly, we see that the shapes of the urban tissue they follow somehow a similar language, and then the mosques has a very distinguished and unique shape that acts as an attractor point, a secondary attractor point that moves the urban tissue towards the valley. Now, in order to understand this development, it is very important to understand how the Berber mosque functions. We know that mosques generally have similar characteristics. However, in the Berber regions, the mosque is mainly a prayer hall. So the prayer hall is a multi-purpose room where the education rooms, which could be an educational school and social space and public space. So when we look at the shape of the prayer hall, we see that the orientation of the prayer hall in number 3 is oriented towards the southeast, and this is because of the direction of the Qibla. So initially in the Berber villages, the prayer hall is the main mosque. Now, when you look at the other rooms, we see that the development of the other rooms follow the street network. So we see that each room represents the development not only of the street network, but also of the mosque as a building form. Then we have the last phase, which is the Quranic school, number 4. Now, again, in Berber cities, the Quranic school is found in cities where economical and social growth has been seen. And significantly, we see that the shape of the mosque seems to follow somehow sort of the order, and then the Quranic school comes in a different shape and different form, following the orientation and the deviation of street networks towards new attractive points, creating the form of the mosque in its final shape. Now, as the form once stood at the periphery of the city, which also is a significant point in order to understand the formation process, not only by understanding the attractor points in the urban tissue, but also understanding the local Berber heritage and the use of spaces in the Berber tradition. So as the mosque stood once at the periphery of the city, it stood as a public space, a social space, and a place for shelter, place for the needy, where people who would cross the valley route can come and have an access to the mosque, but not to the city. So in order to preserve the mosque's function, the last formation was formed through a set of fortified castles. So we can see that this set includes a set of fortified castles, unlike the rest of the village, where it is more simple residential dwelling. Within this fortified castle setting, the gate stands at the entrance, at the beginning, in a communal space active. So the way this place is formed really emphasizes the way the locals actually, the genius of building, of developing the city. As the foreigners would come to the valley, they would access the gate and go to the marketplace. So the traders would come and put the goods in exchange in an area that is highly monitored and observed through castles with observation towers. However, in order to keep the mosque as a public space, a path was created throughout this set in order to allow the mosque, the public place. Now, this was also emphasized through the continuity of the fortified houses along facing the front and the side of the mosque in order to keep the surveillance in the territories. So when we look at the final step of the formation of the final formation of the mosque, the start of Haddou, we see that all the routes lead towards the hilltop, supporting the idea that the hilltop was the initial base of the settlement. We see that with the street network within Taksar and outside of Taksar all merge in the hilltop point, making it the source of development of this settlement. Now, the street network is very significant in this region. Again, it is important to note that it is very important to include the Berber tradition and how the Berber tribes behave socially in this context. So the street networks acts as a special social place where the connection between the agricultural land and the Ksar is a common behavior. So locals would go back and forth between the agricultural land in the Ksar, creating a social, making the street network a social place. The development of the urban tissue, the creation of tunnels supports this and makes the street network a beneficial social place in different climatic conditions. Now, in this regard, the religious influence is very significant in the history of the Ksor settlements. The history of the spiritual saints in the region is very significant. According to the oral tradition, the saint Sidi Ali Omar, who managed to ensure security, was a soldier in time of wars, and in his honor, the locals built what we call a marabut. The military history is very significant in this regard, not only to understand the history of the city, but also to understand the building types that were built and had to be built in order to adapt with the environment that the settlement existed. In this regard, we talk about the building typologies. In the settlement, two main building typologies exist. Tigmi is one of them, which is a traditional 1 to 2 story courtyard house belonging to modest families. The patio makes open spaces where light enters the house. The planned layout of Tigmi house consists of animal shelter, storage room, and a residential zone. This is another example of a Tigmi house. However, does not have a patio or a courtyard. Instead, it has a cave room, which is a common and conventional building technique in building type in these cities. The second building type is Tigremt, which is the fortified castle. Now we see the difference from the Tigremt to Tigremt. The Tigremt is a multi-story residence characterized by more embellished architectural appearance and embodies a dwelling of power and protection. This is a schematic plan of Tigremt and shows the use of space. So the ground floor usually is for animal shelter rooms and animal supply rooms. The upper floors are for residential use, and the towers are for the military and observation purposes. These are pictures of the towers at Tigran, giving an example of one of Tigrams in the settlement. And these are the 40 towers, the inner courtyard. Now, if we analyze the typological different types of the buildings, we have somehow a typological process that occurs in the settlement. We see the example of Tigran house and Tigran's house, which is a simple residential dwelling house and a military house. They both follow a primitive square type of form. Montagne actually was one of the historians in the region, a French writer who speaks about the origin of the Kasbah that derives from a primitive square enclosure flanked by 2 or 4 towers. Both structures share the same term of enclosure. However, the military and administrative factor shapes the Kasbah in a different form. We will talk briefly about the construction material to give an understanding of the ancient techniques that make in the building of these settlements. So here are examples of the main building material, which are taken from the available material and the availability of the material in the land. So we have the use of palm trees, reeds, and adobe brick. In the construction of the wall, the known traditional way of making walls is through the tabout technique, where ramped earth and mixed of chopped straw are mixed and placed within these wooden panels, and in order to ensure security. A significant factor in the walls throughout the settlement is that the thickness of the walls is 45 centimeters, which equals to 1 cubit or a forearm length. The horizontal structure presents the use of local material in order to adapt with the use of local materials in reeds and wood adapt with the construction with the ramped earth, and they create a homogeneous mixture. Street network presents 2 types of streets: the shaded streets and non-shaded streets, and they vary across the settlement, presenting a rich street network. The gates are very significant as they stand as one of the most important and significant parts that not only as in terms of appearance but also construction material. So the height of the gate is 3.5 meters height, and it takes its form and shape in order to allow merchants with animals to access the settlement. And this is a picture of the sun leading towards the marketplace. The storage rooms show different types of, the doors are wooden doors and they show different sizes of rooms. Storage rooms are small rooms which are made in such a way to conserve the climate within the rooms. And then we have the Kasbah's main doors, which presents what we call the wicket door, or Bab al-Fukha in Arabic, which is a door divided into 2 doors, one for the residents, the dwellers, and the big one for the animals, in order to access the house. The windows and openings follow proportions of a singular set of guidelines across the village and must be either square or rectangle. Windows are earth-bound opening with concealed wooden lintels enveloped by window grills. In this regard, it's important to understand the geometrical appearance found across the Ksar. So the windows and the openings are very significant in this term. From this, we move to understanding the ornament and motive design in the Ksar al-Tanaki. The geometric language is an indispensable part of the tangible heritage. Ornament motif carved through the outer walls of Tower Kasbah seem to be related to Tifinagh Berber script. Like we see, this is an example of Kasbah in the Ksar, and we have the motif ornamental design for the Kasbah, very comparable to the Berber script. This is an example of the Neo-Berber script. This geometric pattern is not only seen through the motifs and decoration, but is also seen in the inner design of the Kasbahs. These are pictures I took within the Hajj Muhammad Kasbah, and we can see that the repetition of geometrical language seen throughout the outer appearance and the inner design of the buildings. a closer look to place the settlement in its historical context. Ancient sources speak about the simultaneous existence of the Berber communities with the ancient Egyptians. In this regard, we look at the term enclosure, which is identified in the letter H. So in different scripts, we see Libico Berber and Tigna be some of the most ancient Berber scripts. We see the comparability in of the shapes. We know that the ancient scripts represent motifs that identify not only symbols of what occurred in the real life, but they had meanings. So the symbols were not only symbols, but they were meaningful symbols. The term enclosure, or in Proto-Semitic that speaks of the word hasr as courtyard, is where the word qasr in Arabic derives. And we can see from the Diachronic, which is one of the latest Berber scripts, identifying the word enclosure in the symbol of 4 courtyard pillars or 4 fortified towers. An example to put this in comparative understanding, the word Tigrant was placed within the Neo-Tifina, which is a Berber script, and the hieroglyphic script, which is showing a noteworthy comparison. Now, throughout this connection between the Berber tribes that from northern Morocco all the way to Egypt, this connection not only stood for centuries because of the Berber communities that existed in the North African territory, but also continued through the post-Islamic introduction, as the pilgrimage route allowed the continuity of the connection of these routes and the trade routes. In this regard, one of the most historically recorded trade routes connected Timbuktu with Dra is a very significant one that is noted by many historians and geographers. Al-Bakri states that from Timbuktu to Dra, different oasis settlements stand, and they were the reason for the continuity of the trade routes. In this regard, we give the example of the Qasr Wadan, which was also named Qasr Wadan, similarly like Qasr Ibn Haddou. The example of Qasr Wadan shows a similar urban organization of the Qasr Ibn Haddou. This is in Mauritania and along the same trade network. So this is a picture of the mosque of Qasr Wadan, and the mosque stands at the periphery of the city, exactly like the urban distribution of the Qasr Ibn Haddou. Also, another noteworthy comparison is seen through the minarets, which show resemblance with the towers in the Qasr Ibn Haddou. This is a brief and final conclusion of the current state of the settlement. The settlement is now one of the most famous movie sets in the world. It is home. It was home for over 20 movies, and in August 2023, I was inside, and it was the filming of Gladiator II was taking place in this area when I was inside. So, short discussion and conclusion. In order to answer the question of how the Qasr was formed, understanding in the urban tissue throughout the formation and the understanding of the geographical context was very necessary. The conventional notion that the sub-Saharan settlements or nomadic settlements was actually probably like several archaeologists, researchers explain that maybe the reason the early writers spoke about the nomadic nature was because of the movement, but not I lost the word. So the nomadic attribute was actually an attribute of movement throughout the territory, but not reflecting of the architectural language and the development in the social organization within the settlement. So this was done through different levels. Identifying the historical level through a territorial level, geographical level, urban level, and a building level. We've seen different phases in which the ancient, from the trade network, the positioning of the Qasr within an oasis habitat, the hill as a natural defense location, influential social religious attributes, shaping the urban tissue, not only a nomadic town shaped by agriculture harvest, The building level presented a result of urban development and adaptation of geographical natural nature of the land, economic, social, religious aspects of the Berber life. The examples were seen through the hilltop, and examples of the attractive points are the gates and the mosque. The mosque presented a significant example in understanding the building environment driven by economic and social growth. The type of morphological study indicates an interconnectedness of multiple contributing elements in the process of urban development. Bexar functions as a fortified city, and so does the Kasbah, signifying an organism within an organism. The urban development from Tigrimmeh to a Kasbah and the need of protection, the social classification of the built form identify a highly organized society. When was the Bexar identity formed? The ancient history of the large geographical Berber heritage and the Qusur across North African plateau speak of the ancient nature of these cities. The Berber Bank stands as a witness to ancient building techniques and the building types exist in the settlement, given the examples of the caves. The hilltop as a source of an urban growth suggests the origin of the town, which is not studied yet. Traces of Haddou's history to an older age. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Imam Saidi, for you need to turn up the audio there. For your presentation, illustrating that that we're now 3 years on the understanding of this place, which has not been studied so much by other authors until then. So I do believe your contribution to the study, knowledge, documentation, history of this settlement and the surrounding region is relevant. Now, we can give the word to the jury members for their comments. I just want to say one thing. Perhaps you should have outlined, no, let me outline for you that I think a lot of scholars believe that kla, the Arabic word, comes from castor, the Latin word, from fortification. It seems like it does not. It is has a different history as derived from the Egyptian term khur, which means fortification. So that's a very important thing. But this castor, right here, eventually dates before Romans. That is the core of your message. Not only the word, but the settlement, the alphabet, the culture, the language, the people, their religion, because they were Jews before the introduction of the Muslim religion, suggests that this settlement was there many years before the Romans even existed. But that's the one very important thing to underline. Okay, now, jury members and the co-advisor, and I don't know in which order, whoever wants to speak. If you want from here, you would have to go there because otherwise nobody's going to hear you. Or Guido, you want to say something to begin with?
Sure. Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you, Iman, for your presentation. As a co-advisor, I only would like to congratulate with Iman for the hard work she developed during the past year, working on this topic, which is, as Alessandro said, quite interesting, especially considering that Ait Ben Haddou is in the world list of UNESCO, and such studies, in my opinion, have not been developed so far. So the outcomes of this thesis are relevant for the development of the investigations related with this settlement, and also opens new consideration on the protection and restoration of the whole settlement. I think that the work has developed very deep from the territorial scale up to the single elements of the buildings, such a lot of inputs which help to defend the final thesis she proposed, and I agree with their outcomes. And again, I think it is a very solid and deep work she has presented today, also if limited in the time, so that I also appreciate the connection between the different sections, because they show that there is a progress in her work from the broader scale to the smaller one, and all of these help to understand the process and at the end the outcomes of the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, maybe we could call Mehmet for this moment. Auslan, volunteers? Okay.
I guess so.
Yes, sure. So, but if you could please go there, or also you can connect it with your own computer and do it from there. So
Yeah, I'm happy to show anything for anyone.
mute. This is what we do every time we teach them.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation, and you have done a lot of work. That's very apparent. I have a few notes. First of all, regarding the outline, and here you didn't present anything about the hypothesis and the research questions and how you started this study. Actually, we should have seen that even in the presentation. So, but it was in the report. So, in the report, first I have to say in a Turkish summary, you need to have it checked. There are grammatical errors there. I'm going to say the same thing I told Nafal. Don't call the section literature review. In the literature review, you are talking about the history of the region and history of the cultural history there. So put a relevant heading there. In the section where you, describe the hypothesis, actually, you're not defining your hypothesis. You're defining what the hypothesis is based on. Okay, you're explaining that the hypothesis is based on this information, but we don't see the hypothesis there. So you need to put a brief and clear hypothesis. Well, you have already done your research and you already have your conclusions, so it's very simple for you to formulate a hypothesis statement. And there is the methodology section in 1.2, and in 1.1 there is research methods separately. I think you should integrate those both, because they're both talking about the methodology you followed. You have explained the data gathering. That's I appreciate that one. The typology analysis, the oral data, and the data from other relevant sources. So maybe just put them in bullets also somewhere. Well, I'm going from this note, so not following a general structure actually. Your maps could have followed the general, the maps that you used from some of them from the sources, some of them you prepared yourself. You have mentioned source primary. Those are the ones you did, right? So I'm not sure that's how you reference yourself. Just check that again, or any of the other professors may help. And in some of the maps, I noticed that if there is information from a source, but you redrew it, the source of the information is different, but source of the illustration is yourself. So you need to also add the source of information, right?
I only have one map that I took from website of Morocco. The rest are drawn by. Okay.
You understand what I'm
Yes.
saying? So then in the oral history, you're talking about this Mr. Ait Malik. So we go right to it. I mean, he starts explaining whatever it was in the historical context, but we don't know who this person is. We don't know how he was selected to be interviewed. So that is part of the research design. You pick some people for interview. So what are the requirements for the interview? So are they supposed to be just old, or are they supposed to be coming from a large family or an older family? I don't know. So how you selected them? So I just have a note, rock the Casbah, some points. I couldn't have done myself. Well, there are things that I'm not sure relevant with your research. Your research is extensive and very well studied, but for example, you put the women in agriculture in the images, and then we have use of materials at some point. I mean, ornaments and morphology, it's all related, but the material, I don't know how you connected that. I couldn't follow that part. And in general flow, I had some difficulty in following because we are zooming in and zooming out very often. So it's actually what you have done is well done. I mean, you're zooming in, showing us the building typology, and zooming out and showing us how it's affected the street network. It's very good, but in the report, it's harder to follow. So maybe before doing that zoom in and zoom out, do an explanation how that section is carried out. Like, again, bullets, flowcharts, I recommend those kind of things. They clarify the general structure to the reader. And I was going to say, you showed some, streets, narrow street pictures with shaded and non-shaded. Don't you realize that's also shaded? Just, it's not covered. It's not covered, maybe because it doesn't need to be covered, because it's probably not in the east-west direction. So most of the day, it always has the shadow from both facades. So maybe that is also affecting the street typology, I'm going to say. And I think I don't have any other notes. Well, for the conclusion part, this is my fault. I couldn't follow the conclusion, easily again. So if you can very briefly just explain your conclusions once again. I'm sorry for taking all of your guys' time. And I'm going to go back to my seat. Not for the presentation.
Okay.
Just okay. And this analysis and values.
Okay, so the results of the study are meant to show the formation process of the settlement, the urban development of the settlement. So this was done through the application of the ridgetop theory, the attractor theory, and through different theories that elaborate on the understanding of how the street network moves and shapes the urban territory. So the application of the theory was done. So this was supported by understanding of the local Berber social, economical, and traditional attributes in order to make this a whole scene of understanding this urban development come to life from a very general perspective. So if we give an explanation simply through the understanding the spatial configuration and the way the street deviation works, we would understand the formation process. However, yes, so this was an important part in order to answer the question of how the settlement was formed. Then this led to an understanding of there's a conventional notion that the sub-Saharan settlements are nomadic settlements. However, the term of nomadic is not really defined into explaining that the nomadic aspect is not does not reflect usually it is used to identify the settlements as they don't have any organization, no social organization, no order, no such genius of development or organism. So this was also elaborated in this. And to answer the question of how and when was it formed, when we look at the urban development, we see that the hilltop was the beginning of this whole expansion. But the hilltop was not given any consideration when regarding the history of the town. So when the history of the town is available sources speak of the history of the town, they speak of the kasbahs as the fortified castles because they are what mainly they were given much more importance than the origin of the town, which is at the hilltop, which is also mainly in ruins. So results of the urban development show that the hilltop the settlement began at the hilltop, opening more assumptions to a more ancient city. So according to the available sources, the construction, the buildings refer something which was not studied with the quantitative research, but it was an analytical study that shows that the earliest constructions were estimated to be around the 17th century. However, the hilltop was not regarded or included in this regard. So in this context, we give an understanding of the historical placement of the settlement throughout a very rich trade network, and along with the urban development, to give somehow an understanding that this has the potential to be a much ancient city. Okay.
Thank you, Mehmet.
Okay, thank you, Iman. This is a very extensive work, and it's obvious from one script you provided. And first, we must thank you for this work that you have actually overcome. I actually had similar concerns with Özlem Hoca, and I have a comment on this. And you know why the presentation was much more clear than the manuscript? Because you have to exclude something that are not that necessary to your main argument from the presentation. And I mean, while reading your thesis, there were so many details. Of course, they are the outcomes of your research. But I believe excluding something is also a vital, thing to make your arguments stronger and more understandable. Because there are so many details. I'm not talking about the urban typology, housing types, etc., but the other details that you have explained extensively that we could not focus on the main argument for a while. And at some point, I was taking notes, and I note myself that are we solving a puzzle here, trying to find out what you are going to lead us or not? So I think you'd better exclude something, even though they are valuable for themselves. They may be very valuable information. If they are not directly connected to your argument, main core argument, why not exclude them? So to make the whole text more readable and your argument more understandable. Okay, there's nothing bad. I'm not saying anything bad. It may be a little more work to exclude these things, but I mean, why should we know about a crocodile image, etc.? I mean, they're not. Yeah. I mean,
that information is quite relevant because it is telling you about the climate change in the area. So we know that in. You turn off the audio. from that source, we learned that there were crocodiles. But
Okay.
today there are no crocodiles. So something changed, matching with the fact that these rivers were 200 meters wide. So now it's a desertic area, but in that time it was not deserted because there were crocodiles, hippos, and they were trading the shell which grows in the water.
Mhm.
So something changed in the climate, extensively changed in climate, and therefore this settlement, which we see today, is the result of the adaptation of local climate change, which was pretty bad in this area. And that's the point. I mean, sometimes information comes from different sources, but in this case, it matches what is on a coin with what is on the description of the soil. And probably most of the Saharan area, one time was green because you can find water underground. You can find petrol. Petrol is the transformation of the faults into petrol. So the reason why you have petrol underground Saudi Arabia because millions of years ago that was but in this area, so what is interesting what's going to happen to us? So what is in this kind of climate change? What's going to happen to us? Martin, you want to come?
Okay, there was one more thing. I think that's that. Should I turn this on?
You don't have to know the volume, but the microphone.
Okay. I think, yeah. Another thing, I definitely agree with Ozan, and I put more emphasis on that. What methods you are going to use in the following pages should be clearly stated at the beginning. Because, I mean, you're at, I don't know, 17th page, I guess, we come across with these two theories that you're going to use to understand or derive some outcomes from your researches, but you're not mentioning those theories at the beginning during methodology, and hypothesis is definitely must be much clearer. I mean, with just one sentence, you should be able to define that hypothesis, and also the methodology should include actually those two theories, what was it? Restart theory and one more. Oh. Yeah, I mean, these, if they took that significant part in your research, this should be mentioned before we get into the whole text. Okay, okay. So, thank you again.
Martin?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, Iman. I haven't read your work, of course. I can only base my comments on your presentation, and I am utterly impressed by what you have shown us today. It was very interesting. I got very intrigued. I thought both methodical, it seemed to be very clear to me, and also your conclusion, even though it became even more clear when you repeated them. I think your conclusions were also clear to me in the start. So I hope that you will get a good feedback from your censors. I have to say that I would be very proud if I would have delivered a work like that, or one of my students would have delivered one of such a work. And I hope you will have time to maybe, as my dear colleagues just said, maybe to streamline your work a bit and maybe find somebody who can publish your work, because it seems to me like there is not very much to find about this, and there's still a lot of things to find out about this place, even also considering archaeological excavations that could be relevant or that could be done in the future. So congratulations. That was very impressive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now turn off. So I do have a few comments, if you allow me. So it would be useful for you now that you have some time to kind of precisely underline the morphological part of the research and give precise answer to the question when and why, when and why it was formed. I'm going to try to retrace the whole thing very quickly. So we got the river, we got the hill, right? And then we have this valley route, which is running like this. Now, I'm not sure, but it seems to me that the presence of the hill forces the valley route to cross the river. Is that true?
Can you repeat that, Hocam?
So the valley route, which is connecting all villages, has villages on the right until here and on the left from there on. Is that true?
Yes.
So you see, now this is the the original path. And this is a wadi, how do you call it, crossing, right? Then you have found there's a very clear plan oriented southeast. Actually, it goes like this, right? Right? So they would be careful about stating that the primitive village is on the hilltop because there is no evidence about that. At least not here. Maybe you can find it somewhere else, but from this morphological consideration, the primitive, the first part of the settlement is the one along the main route, which is deviating, hence the presence of the hill to cross on the other side and continue. See my point? That's step one. Then we don't know when that has been done later, and then the Islamic portion, which is surrounded by castles, right? So these igrams behave, and maybe you can add a little drawing showing that these igrams determine like a.
But they're only positioned towards the valley. They do not exist in that the way you.
The igram, the building type igram forms what we call a fringe belt, the fortified enclosure. But if you think of that, so igram number one, igram number two, forming the fringe belt. The castle is just one another of those fortified elements around the core. You see what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to say that for the evidence that we have, the core of the settlement is this one. From the evidence you have provided, which has to do with the regular planning of that area, compared to the other part, which is not regular, so it was developed later, by the fact that there are two different ethnical parts, by the fact that your assumption is that this settlement was there before Islamic colonization, domination, whatever you want to call it, because we have evidence of this place before the Islamic, Arabic or Islamic, including the language. So it is, phase one, you got this. Phase two, you got the construction of the other part, which is made of a fortified enclosure. Follow me, I'm making it simplified, where one of them castles is bigger, but it is behaving like the other ones. It is surrounding the core. See my point? Furthermore, this is not a promontory. It is a tepe, what do you call that in Arabic? Like a tel, it's isolated. So basically that hill is not connected to any territorial route, which is clearly visible on your map. So there's no path passing along the hill.
But Hocam, I would like to interfere with the sub-Saharan territory is very different. The way the Berbers move within these lands is very different. When we placed them in the territorial organism, we saw that the promontory settlements existed towards the.
But this is not.
It is not, but
It's quite different. So
yes.
if you have a path leading to a hill, that is one thing. There is no path leading here. You see my point? So this hill, what does it do to the morphology of the place? It's basically deviating the valley route from the right bank or the left bank, to the other bank because of the hill. You cannot pass because of this hill. So you have to cross the other side. And if you look at the, the form of the path, you see the hill here, deviating the path, the general path. That's what it is doing. It is not attracting the path. If the hill was done like this and the path was reading the top of the hill, that was a different configuration, but this is not what we have here. What I'm trying to say, whatever you find, you present. The idea of that castle being the origin of the settlement is you're not proving it. Not all you're not proving it, but within all you have shown, you're proving something different. You see my point? Because you're saying this part of the town is Jewish, and so they were there before the Muslims.
I did not say that. I just showed that the Jewish neighborhood existed in this area, but there is no written sources that speak of the Jews present before.
It's Jewish.
Yes.
Most probably it dates to the 1st century.
But does not mean
So
that they were there.
many years before the Islamic colonization. But also it is irregular in plan, right?
Mhm.
So that seems to be earlier than what surrounds it,
Right.
which is it
Yes.
is a different building type.
Mhm.
The surrounding is made of these fortified constructions, right?
Yes.
So it comes to a sequence where we got 1, 2, and then the enclosure. See my point?
Mhm.
Now, just consider that the castle is one of the elements of the enclosure, just bigger than the other ones. See, look,
But I
nice sketch.
also incorporated the oral tradition in this regard.
That's
which
another
states-
issue. If you want to say that the oral tradition says something, you can do that.
Because
But
the
if you
results.
want to prove, morphological speaking,
Mhm.
that is the origin of the settlement, which you haven't done. I do believe that's not the case, because I mean, why would you ever build a castle on top of a hill if there's nobody there? Right? So the logic of the construction of the castle, I got a population, I want to dominate them, I built the castle. So there's a village, and somebody's building a castle. And you see that the core of the village is not the castle. The castle belongs to the periphery of the village. Anyhow, whatever you want to say, you got to prove it. Okay, so I believe that it is not the core. If you want to demonstrate that it is the core, you would have to do it, but your presentation is saying something else. Okay. Martin.
Yes, Alex. I think we're at the core of what morphology can do and can't do, because there are things that more urban morphologists can't do. I thought the presentation was very probable that there was a castle guarding the crossing of a river, and outside that castle a suburb developed, or a trading place or a trading station. But in the end, it's true, Alex, as you say, it's no proof. And it's probably that this proof cannot be undertaken by the methods of urban morphology. We have to think of a more interdisciplinary approach where we also include archaeology, where we have to see what can we actually find can we try to date things? Maybe we have to look at the cemeteries. I think this is as far as urban morphology goes, and so unfortunately we cannot prove or disprove everything with that toolbox.
Well, we did, and what I'm trying to share with you is the result of a state-funded research in Italy about small towns. Castles come after the village, not before. You would never build a village next to the castle, because you want to be on your own, whereas you would build a castle next to the village to tax and submit the people in the village. That we can show this with historical evidence, is what I'm trying to say, with documents. It's not an assumption. So generally speaking, when I look at this, I have in mind that in general, the castle comes after, but forget about this. The morphological analysis she has been showing here shows something different. So the castle is not where the path passes. It passes within the plan floor. See my point? See my point? Moreover, the castle is not the center, juridical center. It belongs to the. So we got a core. So we got a core. And the castle belongs to the periphery. So if you're not able to say when it was built, don't say it. But if you say it was built in the beginning, you have to prove it. That's my point. I'm not saying it. I cannot prove it was not filled. I have a strong hint that it was not filled in the
But if you want to
beginning.
say that's the beginning, you have
But
to
if you want to
prove
say that's the beginning, you have to prove it,
it.
which you didn't. See my point?
But I see you.
But I see you proving something
that
else.
the origin of the village.
That the origin of the village, the oldest core of the village is the one with planned, regular urban tissue, which is where the road bends, right? Where the mouth of the village is. Which is surrounded by fortified structures where the castle is. You understand? It's a bigger gap. Anyhow, the point is not that. The point is whatever you say, you got to prove it. If you don't prove it, you can say it is an assumption. It's okay, but you cannot put that as your, final point because it can be discussed. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hello, hello. Okay, now the echo is gone. So thank you very much. We will be